Hello everyone. Today we are going to talk about the industrial court in Malaysia. So the first legislation were the Industrial Courts Enactment 1940 by the Federated Malay States, the Industrial Courts Ordinance 1940 for the Straits Settlement, and the Industrial Courts Enactment 1360 of Kedah. The Industrial Court did not function due to the Japanese occupation. When the Federation of Malaya was formed in 1948, the Industrial Courts Ordinance 1948 was enacted and the earlier legislation were repealed. The Industrial Courts Ordinance 1948 provided for the settlement of disputes by a permanent industrial court and ad hoc boards of arbitration and inquiry. It provided for a voluntary system of arbitration of trade disputes. The Essential Prohibition of Strikes and Proscribed Industrial Actions Regulations 1965 and the Essential Arbitration in the Essential Services Regulations 1965 were enacted by Yang di-Pertuan Agong by the powers conferred on him under Section 2, Emergency Essential Powers Act 1964. These regulations were repealed by the Essential Trade Disputes in the Essential Services Regulations 1965. During the period of the Indonesian confrontation from 1965 to 1967, coupled with the communist insurgency, there was a threat to national security. Industrial action in the public services was prohibited and provisions were made for settlement of trade disputes in the essential services. There was a compulsory arbitration of disputes by the Industrial Arbitration Tribunal in respect of trade disputes in the essential services. Trade disputes in services not classified as essential services continued to be dealt with by the Industrial Court under the voluntary system of arbitration. In 1967, the Industrial Relations Act 1967 was enacted, whereby compulsory arbitration was introduced for trade disputes in all industries. Any trade dispute which is not resolved through conciliation may be referred to the Industrial Court by the Honourable Minister of Human Resources. The earlier legislation were repealed. On 10th of February 1989, the Industrial Relations Act 1967 was amended to allow an individual workman, irrespective of whether he is a member of a trade union or workman, to make representations to the Director General of Industrial Relations if he has been dismissed. The Industrial Court has jurisdiction to decide on the dismissal of an individual workman if the matter is referred to the Industrial Court by the Honourable Minister of Human Resources. The Industrial Relations Act 1967 was amended in 1969, 1971, 1975, 1976, 1977, 1980, 1989, 1990, and 2007. So, what is industrial court? Court means the industrial court appointed under Part 7 and includes, unless the contrary intention appears, any court under Section 22 constituted for the purpose of dealing with any trade dispute or matter referred to it and any division thereof. The mission of industrial court is to uphold social justice and maintain industrial harmony through expeditious court words and collective agreements. The vision is to be a leading organization in promoting industrial harmony, and the objective is to create a harmonious industrial environment through the process of arbitration pursuant to the Industrial Relations Act 1967. There are two main functions of industrial court in Malaysia. Number one is to hear and hand down decisions or words in industrial disputes referred to it by the minister or directly by the parties. Number two is to grant cognizance to the collective agreements which have been jointly deposited by the employers or trade union of employers and trade union of employees. There are three distinctive authorities under the IR Act 1967. Number one is the Director General of Industrial Relations, and then we have the Ministerial Power, and then the Industrial Court Authority. As for the Industrial Court Panel, President is appointed by the Yang di-Pertuan Agong. Panel appointed by the Minister comprised of the employees' representative and also the employers' representative. For the President and Chairman of Industrial Court, they must have served a minimum of 7 years as an advocate and solicitor, and also a member of the Judicial and Legal Service of the Federation or of the Legal Service of a state. An award is a written decision made by the Industrial Court under the IR Act 1967 concerning trade disputes or matter referred to it, or any decision or order. The Industrial Court is not defined as court under the Subordinate Courts Act 1948 and Courts of Judicature Act 1964. It is a tribunal established under the IR Act 1967. Its authority is limited to those provided under IR Act 1967. All the authority are related to industrial relations only. The Industrial Court shall not emphasize on technical aspect in making an award. The decision of the Industrial Court is final and cannot be appealed. The decision can only be referred to the High Court by any party under judicial review. There is no direct reference to the Industrial Court by the party, except for some cases. At the Industrial Court, we can be represented by trade union or any officer or employees or trade union, employers or their authorized representative, officers or employees of any trade union or employers' trade union, can also be self-represented, representative or officers of trade union where the employees is a member of the union, advocate to represent employee or employer with the permission of the president or chairman, or we can also be represented by any official of an organization, not being a trade union, of employers or of employee registered in Malaysia. Award making can be made by a majority of members, and if there is no majority decision, can also be made by the president or chairman within 30 days with regard to the public interest, financial implication, economy of the country, industry concern, and also to the probable effect in related or similar industries. It must take into consideration any agreement of court relating to employment practices approved by the minister, for example, Code of Conduct for Industrial Harmony. Award making must not be restricted to the specific relief claimed by the parties, but may include any matter or thing which it thinks necessary or expedient. It must also take into consideration Schedule 2 of the IR Act 1967 in relation to dismissal cases and specify the period which it shall continue in force and may be retrospective. Award making must be signed by the president or the chairman, and it may rectify in any award any clerical error or mistake arising from any accidental slip or omission. It is a norm that the award be made in writing with reasons of judgment. An award can bind on all parties, successor, assignee, or transferee of any employer or trade union of employers and any successor to any trade union of workmen which is a party to the dispute. Award is final and conclusive. Industrial Court award can be reviewed by the High Court under Rule 53 High Court Rules 1980. Article 5 in bracket 1 of the Federal Constitution provides the right to any person an opportunity to seek for review at a higher authority on decision made by any administrative or legislative body. Judicial review can be made by any party who is not satisfied with the minister's decision and can be made within 40 days from the date of the award or decision was made. It is not a form of appeal. The minister has the power to make rules and order under Industrial Relations Act 1967, Trade Unions Act 1959, Employment Act 1955, Labour Ordinance for Sabah and Sarawak, National Wages Consultative Council Act 2011, and Minimum Retirement Age Act 2012. As for the settlement of dispute under IR Act 1967, the Minister has the power to refer or otherwise to Industrial Court any contravention of Section 4, 5 or 7 relating to establishment and activities of trade union, to decide whether a person is employed under the managerial, executive, confidential or security capacity in respect of application for trade union recognition, to act as a final arbiter in respect of application for trade union recognition, take necessary steps to resolve any trade dispute, to refer or otherwise claims for reinstatement to the Industrial Court, and to refer any trade dispute to the Industrial Court either on his or her own motion or by joint application from both parties. Thus, we can conclude that Industrial Court is a simple and less complex tribunal compared to the Civil Court. The Industrial Court authority comes under the IR Act 1967 and can only act within the ambit of the Act. The Industrial Court contributes to an efficient and professional industrial relations system. The Minister plays an important role in ensuring industrial harmony is maintained as provided under the IR Act 1967. The Minister has the power to make order and rules to ensure labour and industrial legislations are workable.